There's this book by, I can't remember the author's name, but it's the Four Agreements. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. Thank you. And one of the agreements is don't take it personal. And that has worked for a ton of people. It has never worked for me. I take life very personal. And so that got me on a different path of discovery that I would like to share with you today. Instead of taking life less personal, I've decided to take it more personal, to get deeper into what that really is for me. In Zen, they talk about that, I've shared this before, that enlightenment and intimacy are the same word. And so how intimate can I be with life? And that has been an extraordinary adventure for me in going down that route, in going down the route of let's make this not just a little personal, not just some personal, but very personal. And what does that really mean? And so instead of looking at somebody else and going, what they're saying to me isn't personal, what I tend to do is look at myself and go, how am I personally responding to this? How am I being with what it is they're saying? Because that's personal. How I'm being with what's being said or done, that's personal to me. And so that's the exploration that I've been on for many moons, and it has led me to several places while doing this exploration. One is how many of my thoughts are hilarious, even when at the moment I think they're serious. You know, I can take myself really serious when something happens, and then afterwards go, wow, did I take that seriously? Seriously? Did I take that seriously? And look at that and see, no, that really wasn't. You know, it was how I was being. It was how I was being. And something came up for me this week. I remembered this comic I had seen like ages ago. And it was a dog at a circus on a high wire. And the caption read, Buddy was nervous because he was an old dog doing a new trick. And that's how I feel most of the time, right? It's like, because I have set myself up in life, my vision for my life is to be fully who I came here to be, fully that person that I have dreamed myself to be, with the heroes that I have held up for myself, like Paul Ghiazzo and Anantacrante and Mother Teresa, Gandhi. I look at these people and I go, I want to be that. That's what I want to be in this life. Well, I get opportunities for that all the time. Life is just filled with them. To see how I'm doing, how I'm rising personally in the midst of what's going on. And so this week, I had several different conversations, not just one, but several, where people said to me, what you did hurt my feelings. And I had to be with that, right? And part of me knows that I'm like a bull in a china shop. I mean, I am, you know, I'm large, I say stuff, I'm boisterous, and that I had spent most of my life since I was a little kid with people saying to me, couldn't you tone it down some? Couldn't you just tone it down some? And so I spent a lot of my life in rebellion to that. No! I am not toning myself down. This is who I am. Take me the way I am. That hasn't been always so successful. And so, in taking it all personally, right, I've been looking at, well, what is it in me that needs to be, because what I want to do, I mean, whatever anybody's saying, whatever anybody's doing, it doesn't change who I want to be in the world. I want to be those people I hold up as my heroes. I want to be that. I want to be that loving, compassionate person, no matter what is coming at me. And so when I'm not being that, right, that's the only thing that matters to me, because life is personal. If I'm not being who I wanted to be, if you're not being who you came here to be because you think what's going on is more important than you being that which you came here to be at your highest and best, then you're missing your own point. And don't we do that? Miss our own point because all of a sudden the circumstance is large, or it's scary, or it doesn't feel safe, or it's this or it's that. And then we are responding in ways that isn't actually how we want to be. We just think that's what we ought to do to take care of that situation. But then we might have taken care of the situation, but what did we grow out of it? Who did we become or work towards getting closer just because we took care of the situation in our own nature, our own spirit? How did we grow? How did I grow? And so in this week, what I noticed was that when people were telling me how I did things that hurt their feelings, I noticed how it felt in my heart. Because I don't want to be that guy that's hurting other people's feelings. That's not who I want to show up as. And so if I'm doing that, I get to look at that very personally, because I can feel the heart. You know, when somebody tells you that you hurt their feelings, that's personal. That's very personal. And I feel it that way. And so I look at that and I go, okay, and how am I being with this? And I could feel my heartache. I could feel, and here's the thing about it is, I was digging on that. I was like, look at me. I didn't get defensive. I didn't, tell them why what they're saying is not accurate or that they're wrong or this or that. I'm just sitting in here, feeling it, wanting to, care about that, be compassionate about that. So I came out of those experiences thinking that was awesome. Now, isn't that a bizarre way to come out of something like that? Thinking, that's awesome. But what's awesome is I got to show up as the person I wanted to be and then look at, well, what can I do to make amends? What can I do to take care of their hearts? Because the more we take care of each other's hearts, the more we hold each other tenderly, the better it is for all of us. So I notice that sometimes people say things like, this isn't personal. It's just business. And I heard that in every gangster movie I ever watched. It's not about, I'm whacking you, but it's not personal. That's it. And so I highly recommend not doing that. Not taking a stance of what you're doing isn't personal, even though it's impacting you. Because if you take that kind of stance towards somebody else, you have just dehumanized them. Because they're taking it personal. It's their life. You're taking it personal when somebody says it to you. It's your life. Everything is personal. Because we're the ones living our lives. No? You're living your life. And so, of course, it's personal to you. You want to feel good in your life. You want to feel loving. Well, for me, I want to actually be, and many of you may feel the same. You want to be loving. You can't be loving and say something's not personal at the same time. They're not, one's in the head. Anything you think is not personal, now you're in your head. The other's in the heart. This is personal. This is really personal. And it hurts. Or it feels great. Or it feels like this. Or it feels like that. one of the things I'm noticing for myself is as I am more in this place of awakening, I am feeling deeper and deeper. It's not as if I didn't before, but I kind of cut that off with my mind. My mind is really good at cutting off my emotions. Maybe I'm not the only one. And when we do that, we cut ourselves off from the life we're living. We cut ourselves off from experiencing the power and presence of what's possible. And the other side of the coin is opening to the fact that actually it is personal, number one. And number two, we're very different as to what we experience in that personalness. What it is your life is personal to you. And it can be very different. Now, what I find is there's some similarities that a lot of folks have agreement around. And when somebody is experiencing or having feelings around something that doesn't fit that norm, it can get very uncomfortable. So now we're in the heart and the personality of this is uncomfortable. How are we with that? How are we with the uncomfortableness of when somebody's experience of a situation is so different from your own? From what you're so darn sure is the reasonable approach and you're right. I was having coffee with Sue Goulet, and she was telling me about a job she had. She gave me permission to tell you about this. I don't share nothing up here I don't have permission to, just so you know. You want to tell me something and you want to keep it confidential, it stays that way. But if you give me permission, I'm sharing it. She was telling me about this job she had where she was the escalating person. That when this customer service company got a phone call and it needed to get escalated, that she was the person who took those calls. And people came up to her all the time saying, "How can you do that? That's so stressful." And Sue told me, "I loved that job. That was the most fun ever, dealing with those people. Nobody could understand how much fun I was having in that job." So the question I ask you is how beyond your own understanding can you get to somebody's differences and how they're feeling about life? Because I think a lot of misunderstandings occur because we have trouble imagining that how the other person is feeling about that. And so curiosity is really key to taking life personal, to being personal with it. How curious are you around when somebody, what they're experiencing, what they're saying is so different from your own? And it can be really different. And the reason that came up, and Sue told me about that, was because I shared with her an experience I had. I ran a suicide crisis hotline in fact, I started it. I'm the one who founded it, got it off the ground, trained everybody who was on the phone. It was a peer-to-peer suicide crisis hotline. In 3 years, we took 10,000 calls. We didn't lose a single person. And then I handed it off to a charitable organization, let them run it. Because it was time for me to move on. So after about a year, we had been very successful. We were up and running, and the people who were funding it wanted to meet with me, and it was this rather almost 30 people committee that I was meeting with that was giving us the funding to run this thing. And I made the mistake of mentioning how much fun it was for me running it. Fun? Running a suicide crisis hotline? And yet I was in my element, so of course for me it was fun. The first call I got, the very first call that came in, I took the very first shift when we opened up. Very first 2 a.m. call was a woman who said, "I have a box cutter to my throat. You have 10 seconds to convince me why I shouldn't slice it." We got off the phone about 2 hours later. She had put it away. And I thought, that was incredible. That was awesome. And I loved it. And for me, it was fun because she lived. They all did. Everyone we talked to, because I was in my element and we loved it. But when I said that word in that meeting, I lost my funding the next day. How dare I say running a suicide crisis hotline is fun? I mean, I watched how all you react when I said it. How curious can you be to something that's different from your own sensibilities? Because they're out there. I'm out there. I'm right here. And my sensibilities, I guarantee you, are really different than most people's who are even sitting in this room. And so where do we get to with that? Where do we get to in terms of opening to something that can be so different than our own? Because it's happening all around us. And this is what it takes if what we want, right, our vision here is a loving, thriving, transformational world. But in that, if we try to fit everybody into the box that we're in, that we think is appropriate, that we think is right, then we're missing out on the diversity that's actually going on that could be special around us. Imagine if I had mentioned that at my job interview here, and the people interviewing me, and I'm not saying that this would have happened, but I've seen it happen, where I mentioned how much fun I had running a suicide crisis hotline, I might have not have been hired because it's so out of the box. And I'm not saying that's the case. You got some brilliant people here who have big open hearts who probably could have seen past that. But you can imagine that as a possibility and what might be going on in your life when somebody says something that's so beyond what you think is possible. Because it's happening all the time. People living lives having sensibilities that are so far different from your own, who are taking their lives as personal as you're taking yours. And so how you're being in that, how curious you are in that, how compassionate you are in that, makes all the difference in how we create this loving, thriving, transformational world. We get to do that right here if we, as a group, can get more compassionate, can get more open-hearted, can get more into a place of feeling. And the differences can be so dramatic that the outcomes can be tragic. I read this book, and it struck me at the time, and it still does. It was a story about an artist. And this artist was on the spectrum. And he was a brilliant artist, but he hated leaving his home. And so he rarely did it. And he created this incredible art. And so the gallery that had displayed his art hired him an assistant. Because somebody had to go and see him often and see what he needed and make sure he was taken care of so that he kept delivering art. And he did. And this art sold for more and more money, and he became more and more famous. And at some point, the assistant fell in love with the artist, and they got married. And they wound up having 7 kids. And so with 7 kids, but the noise around the house was so much for this guy that he'd hide in his attic shop where he continued to produce work. He couldn't hang out with the kids very much. And at some point, the wife got really upset about this. She needed help around the house. He couldn't do it. She left him. That's fair. It was a tough situation. He adored this woman. He absolutely adored this woman. And he wanted to show her how much he adored her. So one day, he gets up the courage to walk outside the door. First time in like 25 years he left the house. He walks out. He doesn't drive. He has to take the bus. So he gets on a bus where there's all this noise and all these loud people, and it's just pounding on him. and he's having such a hard time, and he's thinking of himself as, look at me, look what I'm doing to show my love. I'm out in the world. I'm now on the bus. She must be able to recognize this. She must be able to see all I'm going through just to get to her, to show her my love. By the time he arrives, he's exhausted. He has given everything he could just to get there. So she opens the door. She's happy to see him, but the only thing he can do is walk in and sit on the couch. And all she does is yell at him. For is that all you're going to do? You came all this way just to sit on the couch and do nothing? And inside his head, he's just going, don't you know all I went through just to get here? Don't you know all I went through? All I had to grow through and move through just to arrive here. But no, she couldn't see that at all. All she saw is him showing up and sitting on the couch and doing nothing with the kids running around and jumping all over the place. And finally, she just was yelling at him enough where he said, I guess this isn't going to work. And gets up and goes home. I mean, it's a tragedy. But when we don't see who people really are, when what we do is put them through thinking that they're, at the same standard as us, that they're working with the same ideas, the same presence, the same sensibilities, when we put standards, our standards, on anybody else, we have dehumanized that person and made it less personal. Instead of being curious and opening to the realities of who that person is. Because when we do that, we see things that we may not have ever seen before. We can see something new arising. And isn't that what we really want in life? We want the new arising. We can't get there if we're using standards based on whatever we've been thinking about the stuff. There's something new, always available, so that we can have a brand new experience. So that those who maybe struggle more than us can feel successful in the steps they took. When those who are, doing the best they can, and believe me when I tell you, I don't care who it is, who they are, they're doing the best they can. It may look like they can do more, you may think they can do more, but in any given moment, everyone on this planet is doing the best they think they can in that moment. And once we get into a mindset, an awakened mindset of understanding that, our compassion, our hearts open up, because that's what this is about. This is about compassion. This is about being open-hearted. This is about taking life so personally that no matter what somebody's doing or saying, we can check in with ourselves and go, how am I being with this? How am I being with this? Never mind what they're doing. How am I being with this? Am I being curious? Am I being open-hearted? Am I being loving right here and now? Or am I just pissed off at what somebody else is doing? I felt so good about folks having safe enough to tell me that I hurt their feelings, that I could be open and not get defensive, that's me being able to say, yes, I'm getting there. I'm closer to being who I have come here to be. I'm not there yet. I still get pissed off. Ask my wife. But it's my vision. What is yours? What is yours? To have a loving, thriving, transformational world, it starts here. We all know that. But are we actually behaving that way? Are we actually in the moment checking in on ourselves so that we don't dehumanize anybody else? So that we understand the personalness of life, understand how, because of how we are being with ourselves, we create an open space for that person to be them. That's what's possible. And that's what I know for all of us, and that's what I know for the world. Thank you. I love you very much.